So again, welcome to today's session on study rules. We're going to try to cover this topic here from a somewhat practical standpoint of just getting started. I'll try not to get too deep in some of the things you can do with study rules. There's all sorts of options and different things you can do in ARM with this functionality to try to keep it kind of the base level, the 80%, if you will, of the functionality that's mostly used. We'll try to cover that today. So I'm going to kind of start at the end, really, with the presentation here, thinking of the end being the end goal of when a trial is being filled in, maybe being wrapped up for the season. And there's a functionality that's really pretty powerful in ARM called validation. And so we can have the ARM software validate our trials to just systematically go through all of the content of the trial. And there's a few different functions that happen during this validation. It can refresh any entry field that's like automatically calculated. So, an interval, the interval between our assessment and the application, or things like that automatically get calculated, and we'll go through and make sure that those are recalculated so that they are accurate in case anything has changed. It can also go through and perform some basic cross-checking. If you have a unit, but you didn't put in the value, or vice versa. If I put in a temperature value, but I forgot to put in whether it was Celsius or Fahrenheit, ARM can flag that. If you put in a number, I'm guessing you also meant the unit of measure. You didn't do the unit of measure. This should get filled in. There's some logical dates that can be checked as well. And we'll do a couple of examples of these in a minute in ARM as well. It can just do some of those types of checks. It's just logical, are things filled in or not? And then it'll also verify any rules. So if you have rules as part of the definition, so some global sponsors, they kind of have their own flavor of ARM. They have some hard-coded rules that all pop in and tell you what you would need to fill in, things like that. Then those can get checked as well. So that's really what the validation will do. Looks like I hadn't started up my ARM yet. We'll kind of show this process here, just with a real simple example of running that validation. And again, the idea here, we'll try to go real quick. Just I have a baked-in example of something that I've kind of purposefully have some problems with. There we go. Got a trial that has some troubles, and this tool is found under the Tools menu. And near the bottom, there's the check mark here to run this validation, kind of scan through the trial. And when ARM finds something that is wrong, it tells us, hey, something is blank that I think should be filled in. And the nice thing with this, ARM can take us right there. And in this case, it's in my treatment list. I have a unit filled in. I've filled in the formulation unit, but there's no value. So logically speaking, sure would seem like I intended to fill something in here and just forgot it. Certainly not all products necessarily have formulations, so you'll notice it's not like I have to fill in the formulation. My untreated check doesn't have that. It's just a very surface level check that logically with the unit, there must be a value. Because ARM can kind of only go so far with the checks that it has. They're all kind of pretty surface level, just logical things that may or may not match up. So the next problem I have here is an example with those dates. There's a variety of different fields, related to each other as just far as the schedule of when things happen. There's the initiation date, that's like when the trial starts. Then there's dates of application. In this case, it's telling me that my initiation date logically can't be later than when my application occurs. Um, and so that means something's wrong with one of those two dates. And in this case, as I look, this is 2024 trial. So the fact that the application had a 2023 made no sense. So here I realized that I just typed in the wrong year. And that's the reason why I had that error. And I bet if I run this again, that error will go away. So just trying to catch really basic logical mishaps, perhaps. The last one here is just the latitude and longitude. These are just warnings. So technically, I passed the test in some regards. So there are no more errors of things that are just straight up missing and wrong. Now I have something that isn't quite as extreme, but it might be something that I should at least look at. There's a chance there's something wrong, but there's also a chance it's fine. So ARM uses this warnings section to be just a little bit lower in concern. In this case, it's related to my latitude and longitude. So I have a latitude of 1 and a longitude of 1, clearly just placeholders until I actually put in my real values. And ARM knows that because I put in USA as the location, as the country of this trial, there's a really rough boundaries of where legitimate coordinates would be for that country. So ARM can check that and just give me a warning that it doesn't look like your coordinates are correct. They maybe are. ARM can't be certain of that, but it's a warning. And lo and behold, like we said, obviously 1 is not correct. I'm actually just going to clear them out for now because we'll use this GPS in a little bit. So this validation function, really useful to just have, really automate the process of sitting down with a trial and paging through every section to look at the screen and think about whether there's something missing or not. Right? This takes a couple of seconds to run. Obviously, I had some things we had to deal with to fix, but certainly the actual action of checking through everything was going to take us a lot longer. So being able to automate that work is, I think, a huge efficiency gain to use this validation. And ideally, this can be a trialist task. I think that would be the ideal state. But also, if you're a sponsor, if you're sending out trials and receiving them back later in the year, this validation is just as useful. You can run this same process as well. So kind of throughout this whole session, just kind of assume, I think all of this really does apply in either case, whether you're planning out your protocols right now, being able to utilize these functions will be really great later on with validating. Also, trialists running the trials should do this validation. So that's the validation functionality. And the whole reason why it matters at all is that we're somewhat limited in how useful this validation can be because ARM doesn't know your research. So yeah, we check to make sure that certain things were filled in. Really wasn't that some information that's important is filled in. We could only check whether somebody put something but not the unit with it, or vice versa. So really, to make this validation powerful and useful, we need to teach ARM what matters to me or what matters to a specific study. So bringing in the actual, research specific requirements. Like we didn't notice maybe the application date, it needs to be filled in. Maybe we really care. As soon as you do that, well, actually, just the date is just very basic. I really want the temperature and the wind speed for any application. Those really matter for what I'm trying to research. Or if I don't have a crop stage when I do an assessment, there's no good at all. I need to have that for every assessment. Whatever it is that's specific to your research, ARM doesn't know that by default. So in order to teach ARM to check the things that we actually really care about for a particular study, that's where the study rules come in. So our study rules, again, it's all about customizing that validation, making that validation useful to check what are your business rules? What are the requirements? What are the things, if you're a sponsor, it's a matter of all of these trials we run, what do we need to collect? What if we're going to do a summary later on, what do I need in order to run an analysis or combine the data? What are those things we really need to have filled in? Or from just a trialist standpoint, what are the things I always want to make sure to be, to provide the most value and the best documentation of the trials? What things do I want to always be sure that I'm filling in? Even if the sponsor hasn't given me a list of rules to follow, I can build up my own and have my own self-checks of things that I know I want to fill in. So I'm providing kind of maximum value with my trials. You can do the exact same idea with study rules. So like I said, there's a lot of different study rules, but we'll kind of focus on the typical use cases, the 80% of the rules that are out there, primarily used for communicating important fields. This is something that needs to get filled in. These are my requirements of things that need to be documented or need to be performed as part of the trial. There is a capability to lock down information. So again, sponsor, I'm maybe filling in some details about the study that shouldn't change. They are locked in from the beginning as part of the design. They really shouldn't change. I can lock that down even so that way the information cannot be changed by anyone else. And then you can also hide information too. Probably most common use case there would be maybe treatment information. If we have some confidential information about the treatment and the trialist just needs to know the coded name of the product, but the formulation details or something else really should be hidden. They don't need to know that. But within our own system, of course, we want to track all that, and it would be part of our summaries. You can hide certain columns, certain fields in a trial, so that way others who open the trial cannot see the information. So let's go back to ARM. I'm just going to start with maybe loading in a few rules quickly so we can kind of see them in action, what a study rule really does. So I'm just going to load a rule set. We'll talk about this here a little later once we've defined these a little more, but basically I'm just bringing in a list of rules that I have used before. And so now I have some study rules here on the screen, but really they're a little more exciting when you're just looking in the trial itself. So if I go into the site description, for example, now that I have study rules, typically you will see them first just with this shading. So I had a couple of rules that are going to require that the GPS coordinates are filled in. So suddenly my latitude and longitude are highlighted in this pink. It's a communication now to the trialist. This information needs to get filled in. So we're highlighting it on the screen. I have this requirement. There's also a little bit lighter, there's really light shade of blue here, that GPS accuracy. That's also a study rule. It's also something I should fill in. It's a slightly different color because of the type of rule. So let's go back to that list just to see the difference. So the first example was this rule 2 and 3 we are requiring that the latitude and the longitude be filled in. That lighter green, bluish green there is a recommended rule. So same idea that this information should be filled in, but it's not as critical. So just like when we ran that validation and we had those red X's, those were errors. Something is missing here and it's important. That's the equivalent when you make a required rule. It is required to get filled in. It is incorrect. It is an error if this information is not filled in. Whereas maybe it's not quite as important, but I still want to communicate that it'd be really nice if you had this information, it would be great to fill it in. And so that GPS accuracy, that's useful for us to know, but in the end, if for some reason you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. And so it comes in as a recommended rule. So we can see that if we run the validation again. So I'm going to validate. This time I'm going to use the validate trial and log errors. So this will just go through everything that it would check, and it's going to give me that list in the end instead of moving me from one thing to the other. So this just lets us see all of the things that are missing. So a moment ago, before I brought this list in, we had a valid trial, right? There wasn't any inconsistencies that we missed, but we weren't really checking anything agronomic. It was very much surface level checks. Now we've brought in a list of requirements that somewhat, I mean, it's a pretty basic list, but it is actually checking things that would matter to our research. So things like the rating date, I have not filled in the rating date in a few of the different assessment columns. And then like we talked about, here's that latitude and longitude. And those are errors. It is required to fill those details in. And I have not met that requirement. And so we do not have a valid trial yet. But that GPS accuracy is just in the warnings. So we're fine if we don't have it. Sure would be great if we did, though. So that's the key difference in the type of rule. If we look up here, actually in the definition of this GPS accuracy, there are some other types. We've mentioned that, hiding a field, things like that. We won't worry too much about those other types because by and large, requiring recommended, that's the biggest use case to just mark down what information is really important to us. Let me go up to rule number 1 again to look at that rating date. And I guess we can visualize it here on the assessment section as well. I remember to fill in the rating date for column 2, but the rest of these I definitely have not. And so again, we have that pink coloration there. The thing with assessment data is I might have a bunch of columns filled in and planned out. Maybe I'll copy and paste this one here. So I might have columns that are planned throughout the season. And so it's not maybe necessarily fair in some ways if I think about this 5th assessment that I haven't performed yet. Well, how would I know the rating date? It doesn't seem fair that I have to fill that in right now. My trial isn't valid. I haven't even performed that assessment. So one of the components to the study rule as you create and define it is to consider when should that rule kick in. And so that is the condition. If I go back to that study rules, all 4 of these have a condition here. And I'll come up and use this drop down to see that in this assessment data. There's a few different conditions. The primary one with an assessment is, well, it's not fair. Again, doesn't make sense to require it right away. Just because we've planned out an assessment doesn't mean we've done it yet. So the kind of the default condition here is we only require the rating date information when there is assessment data in that column. So it doesn't make sense until I've actually performed the assessment. Well, how do we know whether the assessment's been performed? Logically, as soon as there's data in a column, then it will trigger, and we know that we should fill in the rating date. So if I look here in the assessment data, although that's highlighted, it's highlighted on the screen, so that way we know that I need to record the rating date when I do the data. It's not actually yet applied to column 5. And we can see that if I run the validation, it's upset that I've done 1, 3, and 4. Those all have data values in them, and I haven't filled in my date, but there is no error about column 5. Actually, let me just put in today's date in the rest of these so it's more clear. Those are all okay. So there's nothing here about the rating date. It's highlighted on the screen, so I know when I make that assessment, a nice reminder that's something I need to make note of when I'm filling in my data. But because there's no data yet, there isn't any error until I actually go ahead and put in some data. Then as soon as there is at least one data point even, now that validation ARM is going to tell me, oh, looks like you've done that assessment. Time to fill in the date. So that's the condition. And kind of an important feature on actually defining your list of rules, because you don't want just this, huge pile of problems right off the bat that's supposed to be filled in when they logically can't be filled in yet. So it's important as you're defining that to put in a condition that makes sense with the flow of the trial. So these are kind of the few different types of conditions. We looked at the assessment data. As soon as the assessment data is entered, then we should require one of those header information. Same idea with your application. So if I need, if I'm wanting to require the wind speed at application start, again, how do we know that the application has been performed yet? For ARM, it's all about then the application date. That's kind of the trigger field. As soon as the date has been filled in the trial, then any rule that is related to an application suddenly kicks in. It's required, it should get filled in. Or most other fields, especially in like your site description section that's not tied to an application, most of those then, the timing for when it would kick in would be related to your trial status. So the trial status is a field in your general trial information section. And it's really just kind of a chronological status for as the trial progresses, where are we at in, what phase are we at in the progression of the trial? So you start when the trial first gets created, you're at the setup. And then as soon as there's any sort of date, whether it's an application or an assessment, something has happened in this trial, then ARM will move that to established. Okay, something's happened. We can assume here we are, we've got the trial, things are going. Then it's kind of up to the trialist to go in and update to interim. So as things are moving through the season, you would use interim, whether it's just a 1-year study or if it's a multi-year study, it'd be a little bit different. So there's 2 different statuses for the interim level. Something happens in the middle of the season and can't proceed, there is a canceled, but normally you would progress from interim into final. So now that the trial is wrapped up, we've harvested or whatever kind of concludes this study, you can mark it as final, typically in a contracted sense. That's the end of the trial. It goes back to the sponsor, and then maybe there's some additional steps the sponsor may or may not want to use to say, okay, everything's final. Now I've looked over, done QC, we validated, it's ready to be considered, reviewed, and reported and archived. Don't necessarily have to use each one of those, but the idea is just that sets up the chronology of your trial, and that's what we can use for our study rules. So for example, if I'm in the crop details, I need to know the variety name. Simple enough. The trial list, I'm sure, knows that right away. As soon as the trial has been established, they'll know the variety. But the harvest date, the percent moisture, things like that, well, that's of course never going to be known until the end of the trial. So maybe I would, for any rules for those types of fields, I would select the final as the trial status for that. This way, throughout the season, as you're opening the trial, as the trialist is putting in information while the trial progresses, validation can be used. If everything was just set to, oh, well, we need to know it as soon as the trial is set up, or it always is filled in, then we'll just have this big long list of things, and that validation won't mean anything. It won't be a useful tool because it'll just be nagging us about a bunch of things that we can't even fill in yet. So that's why it's important to just get that condition right, so that way the trial really you can progress through the trial. And the last one, just a small note again, if you're doing some of those other rules like hiding information, things like that, the condition can be used to define who the rule applies to. When someone else opens up the trial, looking at the license, oh, this field is hidden. If it's not me, the protocol writer, then anyone else can't see it. That type of logic, that's all handled in your condition. So just one more time, looking at those study rules, that was the condition list. And here in our site description, when you're creating a site description study rule, you have those options. When set up, established, interim, those are all related then to your trial status. I guess I actually haven't created a rule myself yet. So I've been on the study rules editor. This shows us the list of rules. When we click on one, kind of have an interface to give it a little life as to what the rule is, or if we wanted to tweak it. But really the easiest way to actually create a rule is just when you're in the regular ARM sections, when you're working on filling in crop details, for example. I really want to know the planting date. You would just use the right-click menu, click on whichever field is important, and the last section of the right-click menu is related to study rules. So I can require that the planting date is filled in. And then the sub-options here are all the different status, or excuse me, all the different conditions. So when should the planting date, when would it be known? Well, planting here, we will have planted the trial by the time it gets established. So I'm comfortable making that required at established. But like we said, if we came down here, the harvest date, we know that's not happening till the end, but I do still want it. So let's require that once the trial has been marked as final. And that trial status, again, that's on your general trial right here. That's really what's controlling all of these rules. So the timing the timing of when to check certain things are all related to that. So if I now run that validation once more, we should have one more error. Yep, the crop description, that planting date is now required. We created study rule number 5. But you'll notice that that harvest date is not in the list. And that's because, again, we aren't to that point in time yet of this trial. We're still at established. So anything that's supposed to be filled in once we hit final, it's not in the list. So that way my validation is helpful. It's telling me what I need to know now, not what I need to know by the end of the year. Any questions? That's kind of just our quick rundown to just rules. I got my soapbox here of what's the point? Why do we bother talking about these study rules so much? Again, kind of depends on which side of the fence you might be on. There's good reasons for both, depending on where you fit in the scope of things for a protocol writer or a sponsor organization. This is a communication tool. Certainly, we can write up in a list. I need you to give me this. I need you to give me this. Give a whole long list of things. That's just something that they'd have to cross-reference, or that you can reference back. Hey, you didn't do these things. This is so much more powerful. It's built into the trial. ARM will check those things automatically to make sure they're all filled in. So really, really powerful communication tool just baked right into ARM that's being used to record the information. And like we said, there are some options won't really show in action. It's pretty hard to show on one computer, especially when you're hiding information, but that is possible to document things that you need in-house, but obscure them from the others that are working on the study. On the trialist side, it's a time saver. Like we started at the beginning, that validation of just saving time. Let's automate the manual checking of the different sections. We can do that in a couple of seconds by having ARM do that. And so we can create self-check. Like we said, if the sponsor doesn't have a list of rules to follow, we could make our own to be consistent as a trialist. And if you're known as a trialist who always has everything filled into a T, everything that's necessary, that gets noticed by the sponsors. Sponsors who maybe don't even know what rules are, they might even think you're doing even more work. How is it that they always have everything filled in? That's crazy. We never have to ask for the information we needed. They must work so darn hard. In reality, I just pressed the button and it made sure I filled it in. That really can be a business booster as a trialist to have those consistencies, to make sure you're filling things in without spending tons of time staring at a screen. There's a question here about creating a rule directly in the protocol file. So yeah, one thing, that's a really good question. So here I'm in a trial, very, very clear. When I right click on something, that's the field I want filled in. It is a little trickier in a protocol. Let me create a new protocol here. Especially in, here we are in the protocol description. Some fields are the same in both. Information gets copied over, so it would work in some cases to require something, but here when I'm just clicking on it on the screen, I don't have those options, because we're really talking about, when I click on this, for example, the climate zone, that's just the climate zone here in the protocol. So it is less clear how to make study rules in a protocol. You can, if you come to the study rules editor in a protocol, you can create a rule. So if I click on the site description, section and then press New, it'll create a rule for a site description field. Then I can look at the dropdown and it's literally a list of everything, all of the fields that we can put a study rule on in the site description. So little clunky would be possible. The example was, in contacts, if I want to fill in the study director. So this would be kind of the way to require that the study director name is filled in. So that should get filled in. Oh, I need to click required. Let's require that the study director name is filled in always, because they would know it right away, or I could have trial status is set up. Either way, we should do it right away, right? So let's make sure that gets filled in. This would be one way for you to do that in a protocol, because again, technically, when you're looking at the contacts and wanting to fill something in, this is in the protocol, so it's not in the trial. So the right click doesn't work very well in a protocol. So you could do it manually in the study rules list, but that's pretty clunky. That's going to get really old. So what I recommend would be going back, opening up a trial, whether it's last year's trial, just creating a completely empty trial, get into a trial file, and then scan through to make the rules that you would want. So again, that example, we want to require that study director gets filled in. Pretty easy. I can require that. Let's require the name and their country or something. Go through all the sections, get all of the requirements. We did planting date a little bit ago. Let's do those as well. Require that at the final. Get all of our requirements, and that'll create the list in this one trial. Then we can use those rule sets. So you have a list of the requirements. That's great. It's in this one trial. Now I want this same list, all of these same checks in another file, or in our case, in the protocol for this year. Maybe this was last year's trial. We added all these rules. It worked really good. How can I do this same thing in my next study in my protocol? On the properties panel here, we can save a rule set. The little drop down here, you can do a different subset, but typically save all, it probably makes the most sense. Everything in the list of rules that I have in this trial, I want to save so I can use in my protocol, or I can use in another trial. So I'll do the save all. And now ARM is going to help me create a file on my computer that is just this list of rules. So typically I recommend, naming the file to remind yourself in the future, what's the purpose of this list of rules, or what is this list of rules, or what is its purpose? So few different strategies that you could take depending on how you want to make your rules. Maybe I've just got the one set. This is going to be my only list. These are just, my rules. That's it. And anything I work on has a set of requirements. Perfect. You could name it that way. Maybe things aren't that simple. Maybe there's different types of studies. So maybe this is really, maybe these are the list of rules for any time I do an herbicide study. Pretty specific to the types of things we need to get filled in when we're doing some herbicide work. And then I could do the same thing if I make a trial with our fungicides or biostimulants, whatever type of thing I'm working on probably has a slightly different spin, a slightly different set of requirements. So you can create different lists of rules on your computer. So I try to make that name something that tells you when you'll use this list again. Because as you can see here, I've got all the different rule sets I've created. How am I going to pick between these? The name is kind of the best way. And maybe if this is kind of my first iteration, first time trying out rules, maybe it wouldn't hurt to just throw a year on here. Because after I do this during this year, I'll probably learn some things. Okay, I needed to add a couple more requirements. Oh, this one thing I thought I needed, half my trialists couldn't do it, so maybe I'll take that one out. There's always kind of an iteration that can happen as you're building out your rules. So it might not hurt to have a little versioning built in to know when I created this. So I'll save that to my computer. ARM does give me an option to be more verbose with my description. So if I want to write out in more detail what the purpose of this is, it's more or less just writing a note to yourself or anyone else who wants to load in this rule set. We'll see in a moment when we load in a set in the protocol. You can see what gets written here. So I'm just going to be really verbose to write myself a note. Oh, this is my first time I'm trying to make rules for my Riverside studies. So this creates a file. The extension there we saw was RLS. Doesn't really matter to us what the file type is. It just is going to live on my computer. So that way, if I am creating a protocol, so let's get out of this trial and just make a new protocol. Then on the rules editor, I can load in a set. So I can go find that herbicide rules 2025. And here on the screen, you can see that that longer sentence I can write shows up here. So I can kind of click between them to know to remind me, so what was the point of this? What am I trying to do? So you'll notice brand new protocol. There's no rules here yet. If I load in that list, here's really the best way to get rules into a protocol. So there, all of those requirements are here. And these, of course, will be copied to every trial. So if I'm send this protocol out, I'll get 10 trials back. As long as those trialists all are using validation, I can be confident that the study director's filled in and the dates are filled in because I've got those rules in place. So again, that's using the set functionality. Let's save this list. I want to use it again. Here I am in another file. I can load in that list. And to kind of show the other question, you can do this more than once. So I can load another set. So kind of one of our tips that you can do is maybe take a couple passes through your files. You could create a baseline set. Any trial that that I'm going to run has to have this information. I always put GPS coordinates. I'm always putting in my reading dates, things like that. Then you could create other lists like we did the herbicide example, like whatever discipline or whatever category you might want. For a different type of sponsor, there's certain sponsors that have things they're always asking me for. They're not using rules yet, but I could make a list just for them to make sure that I fill in what they always want me to fill in. So if I choose this baseline rule set, ARM is going to take the list that was saved here and just simply add it to the ones that are here. So now I'm up to 9 different study rules. And if you're ever looking at this list and wondering, where did this come from? Why is this here? You can see at the very top of the screen, it says which rule set that particular rule came from. So, okay, my planting date, that came from my herbicide rule set. The address, that was my baseline. So I'm trying to diagnose, why is this here? Do I even need it? Something like that. you can see that where that rule was loaded in. And if I made it myself, there just isn't anything. So it's just blank for a rule that I've created just by hand. Another good question here, how to share your rules with other protocol writers. So let me just pop open my computer, right? So the nice thing here is we just saved this onto my computer. Kind of the magic location where ARM usually saves these things is in your program data directory, and you find your way down here to this GDM def, the GDM definitions, and this is where all of those files you create. Pretty much anytime you save a set of something, a rule set, a assessment set, or here today a rule set, that goes here in this folder. So at the most basic level, the most simple way to share this would be just to send it in an email. Or I could, maybe copy this out to my company's network drive or, cloud, OneDrive or something where everyone can see. Then anyone can go out, they could copy those rules into their own computer, or when you're loading a set, it starts in that GDM def, but I could go out to somewhere else. So I could go out to my company's Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever and go find, if I remember where that folder is that everyone has been saving their ARM stuff in, I could load the rule sets from there. And then just depending on how advanced your group gets, we do have some mechanisms to formalize it even farther. So if you're finding yourself, yeah, oh, we love study rules, we're doing the SEs, even our favorites list we love so much, can we share and have everyone be using the same everything? Just contact us. We can help you. There's a couple different ways to even sync this whole folder, all of the lists and things that you're doing. You could even get that folder to sync across all of your users in a company. And then everyone is really connected to each other, very, very standardized, because then everyone can have those sets and lists and things like that. All really working together. And that's pretty surprisingly easy to set up. So just reach out to us and we kind of help your group do that if you want to grow that way. But at the most basic level, just put these files somewhere where everyone can get to them, whether it's in an email or out in the company drive. Great questions. They led me kind of right into exactly what I wanted to talk with. So that was perfect. So we've kind of covered these rule sets. Again, it's just that list that I made that works so good in this one trial. I want to use it again. Let's use that same thing. And that really brings a standardization to this automation process of checking our trials. And there's no way that you can mess up your list of rules. So no matter how many rule sets you create and how many you load in, ARM is very good logically making sure that there's no combination of rules that can mess with each other. So when a rule set is loaded, ARM scans the existing list. So for example, if you had a rule that requires the GPS coordinates, but you load another set that only has it recommended, well, then that rule just won't even be brought in. It'll just get ignored because the strongest one wins. So in that trial, there'll just be one rule that requires it because that's like the strictest version of what's there in that one trial. So you don't have to worry about breaking things. You don't have to worry about breaking it yourself. Also, if you're a trialist and there is a list of rules that came from the sponsor, hopefully this is a green light to you. You could still use your personal rule set as well. You could load yours on top and know that you won't break anything. ARM won't let you mess up the list, and the sponsor will say, well, wait a minute, you forgot to do this. Oh, oops, I put my own rule set in. You can guarantee that it'll strictly be additive. It'll just be everything the sponsor wanted plus anything that I want to do that they didn't already have. And just kind of wrapping up with some tips and tricks. I've probably said most of these already. Um, just trying when you're getting started with rules, don't use an empty page. Don't create an empty trial and just have to look at page after page and guess. I think it's a lot easier if you open up last year's trial. And the sooner from that trial, probably easier to think of all the pain points, right? That's one of the advantages if you're a sponsor getting started with this. Really, the question is, what do we always have to ask for? What is it that the trialists forget to fill in, or that we really need to collect, that we're always having to ask the trialists, follow-up emails to get this information? Those should become study rules. And that way, hopefully, the trialist will run validation and see them. But even worst case, when we get the trials back, we can press one button and see what's filled in and what's not. So seeing last year's trial all filled in and just looking at those pain points is really the best starting point, at least for a rule set. And then we kind of talked about the strategy a little bit on those rule sets of making a master set of your baseline requirements, and then you can just craft other ones for um, specific disciplines, specific companies, specific types of whatever that you yourself would know and utilize. One of the reasons I don't like to dive in too much to all of the other types of rules, but just point out that there are more that you can fiddle with, is it's already a lot, right? It's already plenty of doors have opened if you've never used rules before, just to see the basic functionality. And so don't be afraid to start simple. You don't have to have 100 rules the very first time you do it, but then also don't be surprised if you end up with a lot of them too. The computer deals with it anyway. It's not something a person has to deal one by one with when it's all said and done anyway. So just start simple, and then next year you can make another iteration, and you kind of learn and see what worked and what didn't. What did we forget to make a rule? Oh, I still had to send the email to ask for the harvest date. So and so still forgot it again. I need to put that in as a rule. You know, you'll learn and can grow, and it's very easy. I go to ARM. It's very easy to save another set. You could save right over the top if you wanted to just keep remembering that my herbicide, this is just the latest one. Or like we said here, I kind of strategized and put the date on it. So if you include the date in the name, you can kind of version history if you want, just for reference. But it's very easy to save over the top. If your baseline just is going to update, Windows will tell you when you saved it last. So you can save it right over the top. So that way next year, when you're loading in the baseline rules, that's the version that'll get used. So it's easy to iterate, it's easy to grow. Also, just that required versus recommended. So one thing to think about, especially in a contracted setting, if I'm writing a protocol, I have someone else doing and filling in the trials. If I mark something as required, it has to get filled in. It's not valid if you don't, but in reality, it's maybe flexible whether it is or not. Or there's some scenario that can pop up where I can't document that information. then you end up with a situation where the trialists are stuck. In theory, I can't fill this in. ARM is telling me it's not valid, but I can't fill it in. And so then um, really your option is they would need to send you the trial because only you can adjust the rule itself to make it only recommended perhaps, or just delete the rule because it turns out I shouldn't have that as required or whatever. They'd have to come back to you. Whereas if you just have it as recommended, then when they are validating, well, it's not going to show up, I'm in the protocol. When they're validating, it's just a warning. So it won't stop them from considering it as valid. So you can always kind of start a little softer, if you will, by doing more recommended than required. As long as as long as the trialist runs the validation, they'll still see that they should fill it in, but there's no showstoppers, there's no big red X's that this is wrong in those cases. And finally, if you've got a group of protocol writers, we've mentioned, how can I share my list? It might actually be a good idea to get the group together to actually make your rule list. Kind of have the hive mind of all the pain points that everyone can think up, all getting those into a master list. And so just maybe setting aside an hour for everyone to work through that idea, and just one person share their screen, everyone's on Zoom, and let's just call them out as we go. I'll just go screen by screen, and anyone who says, "Oh, I need this, I'm always asking for that," everyone just shout it out, and we'll just make the list, and then share that with everyone. That can be a good way to populate that master list and have it really useful for groups. And finally, if you're mid season, maybe you're watching this recording. We tried to time this when the season's just starting, but if you're listening to the recording, you're like, oh, this is really cool, but it's way too late to put it in a protocol. Everything we've done here can be done in a protocol or a trial, and there's no reason you can't make a rule set um, in a trial, save that to your file, save that to your computer, and then just every time you get interim data back, load that rule set. And that can be your automated check through everything to send back the list of what is incomplete. And then just at the start of next season, you'll know it'll be even easier because you'll make sure to put that list in your protocol so the trials already have that. But it definitely is something you can start mid-season. There's no reason it has to be in the protocol because you can always just load that list of rules right in the trial once you get it back. And every time you get it back, if you want, as the trialist has already been working on it, you don't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily have to send them a trial back with the rules in them. That might be ideal, so they could run validation, but bare minimum, you can definitely run that validation with the list on your computer. All right, well that's kind of my list here. Didn't talk too long. I guess if there are any other questions, we did kind of run right into our hour here. I appreciate the questions we had throughout. That was really great. Like I mentioned, if you do want to share these lists with your group, get in contact with us. We can help you set up a shared drive between each other. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining, and hopefully we'll be seeing you at another webinar soon.